You're listening to Puma Podcast.
Imagine this. It's a sunny Sunday afternoon. You're enjoying it with your friends, playing some pool, sharing a few drinks. Then suddenly, armed men, and then gunshots. You're hit, but you're alive. Ano gagawin mo? This is the story of the drug war victim who survived. I'm Franco Luna, Puma Podcast, and you're listening to Teka Teka News. Efren Morillo is a simple fruit and vegetable vendor and the single father of two. He grew up in Payatas, Quezon City, where the city's poorest families scavenge to survive. He's just like you and me. He works hard, makes a decent living, and tries his best to put food on the table for his family. In late August of 2016, he found himself face to face with what turned out to be a drug raid. It was the stuff of everyone's nightmares at the time, with President Duterte's so-called war on drugs still in full swing. And that night ended like so many others in the Philippines, with all the suspects shot, including Efren. But Efren, who was 28 years old at the time, didn't die.
Efren is actually a survivor of a Tokhang operation. In fact, I call it a very miraculous survivor story. It was really a Sunday afternoon. So Efren is actually an entrepreneur. He went to his friend's house para po maningil ng pagkakautang. At syempre dahil it's a Sunday afternoon, it was August of 2016. So chill lang, relax lang sila. So sabi ng friend niya, sige, maglaro muna tayo. So naglalaro po sila ng pool.
That was Attorney Gilbert Andres, one of the counsel of Efren. He's also the Deputy Executive Director of the Center for International Law or Center Law. Sabi niya, bigla na lang may pumasok na lalaki. Around 5 to 7 of them, all armed and wearing civilian clothes. And in true Oplan Tokhang fashion, they asked Efren and his friends if they were drug addicts. And when they said they weren't, the men searched the house anyway while holding them at gunpoint. They didn't have a choice, and the cards were stacked against them from the very beginning.
And then allegedly may nakita daw silang foil at swela sa toy gun. Kaya sabi na, so huli na kayo, aresto na kayo. And then pinaupo si Efren at yung friend niya sa isang upuan. And then all of a sudden, yun binaril na si Efren malapit sa puso. So tumba si Efren at syempre, yung survivor instinct niya talagang nag-turn on kaya siyang nagpatay-patayan. Tapos unfortunately, nakita niya rin yung kaibigan niya na nakaupo, binaril din. Tapos pagkabaril, tumba, binaril ulit sa pool sa ulo. Kaya it was really a traumatic experience para kay Efren. And then nakita niya na yung assailant pumunta sa kabilang kwarto at pinagbabaril yung tatlong kaibigan pa.
Nagpatay-patayan si Efren. He had to play dead for hours after he got shot by the men in civilian clothing. And he watched as his friends were also murdered one by one, executioner style. He didn't yet know who those men were, only that they were armed and looking for drugs. And like any normal citizen would, his first instinct was to go to the authorities for help. And once he reported the incident to the police, what he discovered changed everything.
Grabe nga Tapos umalis na yung mga assailants. And then si Efren, dahil sa survival instinct niya, nag-crawl siya palabas. And then nag-crawl siya, mayroon pang ravine at some point. Nag-crawl siya hanggang sa highway. At doon na po, na sumakay siya ng isang public utility vehicle. At dinala siya sa nearest na clinic sa may Montalban, Rizal. At alam naman po natin na sa Pilipinas, kung mayroong po duguan dahil po sa isang gunshot wound, kailangang i-report sa nearest police station. Kaya nireport si Efren sa nearest police station sa Rizal. At nung dumating mga police officers, in-interview siya, doon nila na-discover that it was actually a Tokhang operation. At doon na rin na-discover ni Efren na police pala yung gumawa po noon.
Once the police got word that someone had survived, they sent a few officers to intimidate him. Gilbert says binantayan pa siya sa ospital while he recovered. You might be asking, why bring up the case again now? Well, the Office of the Ombudsman on July 21st actually junked the criminal and admin charges filed by Efren against the police officers from that night. This all happened nearly a decade ago, but there's a reason Efren's story matters now more than ever.
Before I address the merits of the appeal, I would like to state that it is rejected by the appeal chamber by majority and that the impugned decision is therefore confirmed.
You just heard Judge Mark Padden de Brishambo of the International Criminal Court. On July 18, 2023, he read out the Global Court's decision on the Philippine government's appeal to have the probe into the drug war stopped. And it's all but decided now. The investigation will continue. And human rights groups say this marks the next step towards justice for victims and their families. Just to catch you up, the Philippines was at one point a signatory to the ICC until former President Duterte withdrew the country's membership after the court began probing his drug war. But under the ICC's withdrawal mechanism, the ICC actually keeps jurisdiction over crimes committed during the membership period of a state. That means they still have jurisdiction in the country between 2016 and 2019 when the Philippines' withdrawal became official.
The majority finds that the Philippines has failed to demonstrate the pretrial chamber erred in placing the onus on the Philippines to show that investigations or prosecutions are taking place or have taken place. The majority finds that the Philippines has failed to demonstrate any errors of the pretrial chamber in the impugned decision.
But on our part, it's clear the Philippine government is done communicating with the International Criminal Court in connection with its investigation into the country's drug war. This is what President Bongbong Marcos had to say immediately after the appeal was junked.
Basta tapos na lahat ng ating pag-uusap sa ICC at kagaya ng sinasabi namin mula sa simula, we will not cooperate with them in any way, shape, or form. We continue to defend the sovereignty of the Philippines and continue to question the jurisdiction of the ICC and their investigations here in the Philippines. They are talking about Filipinos, their alleged crimes are here in the Philippines, the victims are Filipino, bakit napupunta sa The Hague?
We're pausing for a quick break now. When we return, what's next for the victims of the drug war? Fortunately for the relatives of drug war victims, Efren's chilling first-person account of the events that day challenges the claim that the thousands killed in Duterte's drug war were killed by the police in self-defense. He saw it himself. Hindi sila nanlaban. His testimony lies at the heart of the first court case to challenge that campaign, and the Court of Appeals eventually gave them a win.
Kaya nga nung mga January of 2017, nag-file kami ng petition for amparo for Efren, as well as dun sa mga kaanak ng mga namatay sa Tokhang operation. And fortunately, the Court of Appeals actually issued a decision that granted the permanent protection order for Efren as well as for the other petitioner families. And in fact, dun sa kanilang decision ng Court of Appeals, there's actually a 1 kilometer radius of protection for Efren and the other petitioners, both in their residence as well as in their workplace. In fact, the CA suspended Oplan Tokhang against Efren and the other petitioner families. So this is really, I think, the only decision wherein Oplan Tokhang was actually suspended.
Attorney Gilbert can't help but think, for every Efren, there were 100 others who were shot, whose stories we will never hear, and whose deaths have no witness.
Pinuntahan pa siya ng mga police officers from PCP4 ng Quezon City, mga 9 p.m. And then, napapunta lang siya sa East Avenue Medical Center about 12 midnight. And miraculously, after surgery, he was able to survive. And then paggising niya, yun, nakaposes na siya. Arestado siya kasi na warrantless arrest siya. In fact, the fear was so real that when we actually became the lawyers of Efren sa direct assault charges sa kanya, naturally, di ba, dapat mag-file siya ng isang criminal complaint, di ba, for frustrated murder. Pero hindi yun yung naisip niya. Ang naisip niya pa talaga yung threat sa kanyang right to life, liberty, and security.
Efren Morillo, now 34 years old, was acquitted in March of this year of the direct assault charge that the police filed against him. But again, the charges filed by Efren against the police officers from that night were also dropped. Center law says the dismissal of charges against those same policemen only necessitates the International Criminal Court probe into the drug war. Center law argued that the ombudsman's decision disregarded testimonies by physicians that Efren was shot by a standing police officer while he was sitting on a chair. They said the entry wound was upward facing on his front and downward on his back. They also claimed that the dismissal of complaints went against court decisions, particularly a Quezon City court acquitting Morillo from claims that he attacked police officers involved.
There's really a need for the ICC investigation because in the first place, why did those 6,000 persons murdered, killed in police operations? Kasi in the first place, hindi dapat nangyayari yan. Ng police operation, mayroon pong namamatay. Kasi in the first place, merong right to life. At hindi lang naman sa papel yan hindi lang naman mga titik yan na nasa salikang batas natin. Talaga pong very fundamental, foundational human right, ang right to life.
Again, that was Attorney Gilbert Andres of the Center for International Law, or Center Law. That's the number of killings the PNP admitted to during the term of President Duterte. Exactly 6,252 quote-unquote persons who died during police operations. And Attorney Gilbert makes a good point. That's also 6,252 families who were affected. And human rights groups say the true death toll is closer to 30,000.
It's really a challenge for the victims of the war on drugs to really seek justice. In the first place, filing a complaint itself is already a psychological and emotional challenge. Kasi yung unang naisip nila, fear Fear for their lives. Secondly, kung mag-file ka ng complaint, nakatatak na yan sa affidavit mo. Yung trauma itself, di ba? So, kailangan din ma-minimize yung re-traumatization. And in fact, I'm not just saying this kahit sa war on drugs, kahit dun sa Maguindanao massacre, it took almost 10 years, di ba? Bago nagkaroon ng judgment. That's why I want to reiterate my analysis na parang systematically there's a need to address the weaknesses in our justice system.
This all comes despite promises from the president himself that the drug situation is going to be different from the one we saw under Duterte. He had this to say during his SONA in late July.
The campaign against illegal drugs continues, but it has taken on a new face. It is now geared towards community-based treatment, rehabilitation, education, and reintegration to curb drug dependence amongst our affected citizenry. We will relentlessly continue our fight against drug syndicates, shutting down their illegal activities. We will shut down their activities and dismantle their network of operations.
So the investigation will continue. But how can the global court navigate the Philippine government's non-cooperation? We will leave you with this idea of center law.
My analysis is that I don't think the Office of the Prosecutor will send a team here in the Philippines. I don't think they will do a activity that will just end in failure. I don't think that. I think they will do an investigation that will try to resort to all the powers of the prosecutor under Article 54 of the ICC Rome Statute. And it's a very expansive power. They can actually deal with state parties, and there are 123 state parties to the ICC Rome Statute. They can deal with international organizations, for example, the UN. They can also deal even with the NGOs and even with the witnesses and the victims.
all the while the killings continue under the Marcos Jr. administration. And that was today's episode of Teka Teka News. Again, I'm Franco Luna. This episode was edited by Freddy Blanco. Our Teka Teka News executive producer is Jill Caro, and our senior editor is Veronica Uy. If you like this episode, please do share it with a friend or two. And of course, don't forget to follow Teka Teka News and Puma Podcast on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. Thanks for listening.